With us. Well, it's no more news. We had this last week that Nigeria's headline inflation rate slowed for the fourth consecutive month in July 2025, settling at 21.88%, in what is considered a slight relief for the nation facing persistent price pressures. Well, consequently, the 0.34 percentage points decline from June 22.22% has boosted expectations that the Central Bank of Nigeria may soon rotate from its aggressive monetary tightening stance, which has kept borrowing costs at a record high. The CBN has been at the forefront of the fight against inflation, employing a series of measures, including a sustained increase in the monetary policy rate and a stricter liquidity management to absorb excess Naira from the system. Now, on the fiscal side, the federal government has also intervened with targeted agricultural support schemes that the release of grains reserves and import duty waivers on critical food items to ease supply side pressures. According to analysts, these combined efforts are finally starting to work their way through the economy, leading to gradual, albeit uneven decline in price levels. My guest is Managing Director, Financial Derivatives Company Limited, Mr. Bismark Rewane. Thank you so much. Sir Rewane, it's good to have you on the show this afternoon. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
Yes, I think I should start with your overview of Nigeria's inflation rates for the fourth month. We see a decline. Yes, we know month on month we still see that rise, but year on year it seems fair. What is your understanding of this? Have we gotten to that point where we'll start to see a major decline in inflation figures following the economic reforms experienced in the country?
No, let me be very clear. The rate of inflation has declined for 4 consecutive months, but the rate of decline has now fallen to a crawl. In other words, the rate of decline this month was only 0.3%. The first decline was almost 1%. So it's getting to a point where, if anything, it might actually reverse itself. So let's be clear. But it's very important to understand that this is a period of global inflationary rises. We've seen an inflation rise in the United States. We've seen an inflation rise. The UK released their numbers today, which is a record high. And so we're going in the other direction, even though marginally it's comforting news at this time. All right. So I think we need to look at it from that perspective. But when we look at the inflation, we have to look at it clearly. One, what has happened to year-on-year inflation? It's down 21.9 or 21.88. However, the monthly inflation has increased, and when you analyze the monthly inflation, it's actually about 26.3%, which is disturbing because monthly inflation is a more current and more realistic reflection of what the position is. Secondly, I think, or thirdly, actually, core inflation is declining, which means that the policies are now beginning to have an effect. With core inflation, it means the seasonality. Take away seasonality factors, and the inflation that we are seeing now is more transient and structural, which is excellent when you're analyzing it properly. But what we must also consider is that we just rebased the GDP and we reconstituted the basket. In the new basket, food is only 40%. It used to be 52%. Technically speaking, what happens normally is that when people's incomes fall, they spend more on food, not less on food. But this basket has actually reflected it in the other way, which means that there's less spending on food now by Nigerian individuals. That itself raises a question mark. So I think that is important to note. But generally speaking, the trend is your friend, and that we are now beginning to see inflation decline actually moderately, and this will continue to the end of the year. But do not expect a massive fall in the rate of inflation. That we must make clear.
Focused on stabilizing the currency, and we've seen a bit of stability even on the FX side between 1,500 and 1,550, predictability for manufacturers and all of that. But let's talk about the food, beverage, transportation, and all of this side. I think that's where we are really feeling that hit. Is there anything that could be done to address all of the fallout from this end?
Firstly, I think, was it yesterday or today, the president scrapped the 5% excise duty on telco services or whatever it is. I think that's very important because this economy is becoming, and global economies are more dependent on broadband connectivity and telco services. By taking away that 5%, basically you're putting income back to the consumer. It was not the telco companies that was paying it. It was the individuals, you and I, the subscribers and the customers. So by putting 5% of what the telco charges are back into the pockets of people, that helps to give people some disposable income. And remember, it's not discretionary income, it's disposable income. And that was already being taken, now it goes back. So that helps to soothe this, but it's not enough, it's just necessary, but it's good. I think that's important. Secondly, one other thing that we have to note is that we saw that credit to the private sector is falling, which means the banks are not lending to the private sector, and they're lending to the government. They not only lending to the private sector for them, but the lending to small and medium-scale enterprises have also dropped. So we need that level of activity. And why is it dropping? Because interest rates are high enough and are kind of disincentivizing people from borrowing. But on the other side of the coin, you talked just now about the exchange rate appreciating. The exchange rate appreciated and remained stable because foreign portfolio investors came in here to take advantage of the high interest rates. The moment we start bringing down our interest rates, we'll see a reversal of flows. It just happened in South Africa, announced their inflation rate, I think this morning. It went up after they brought down interest rates. So when you bring down interest rates, the risk you run is that inflation begins to pick up, your currency begins to weaken. So there's a trade-off. There's a balancing act which the Central Bank of Nigeria, like all central banks in the world, have to play. I'm absolutely confident that the Central Bank of Nigeria will do that which is necessary. One, to preserve price stability, and also to keep the currency aligned with its fair value. When that is done, you'll begin to see the advantage. That is why you'll begin to see the advantages. That is why the currency has stayed stable. Two, inflation has begun to moderate up to the point where it's now flatlining. And three, investor confidence is building, not long-term investor confidence, but the short-term investor confidence. So we've seen some of the good signs, right? But it's very, very slow. But slow, easy does it, as we say. Slow, but better, right? That's what's happening.
But in that stability, some would also argue that there's been a level of support from the Apex Bank to keep it at that rate. I would ask you, because I know, is our currency appropriately priced at that range? Some say it should be between 1,000 and 1,200. And if it's going to, I don't know what you make of that. I want to know if you think it's appropriate.
Our view that the currency is fairly priced. As a matter of fact, it is. In our view, it's about almost 23% undervalued, right? But you see, when you have a frontier currency like the Naira, you have to give it about a 20%, what we call the illicit premium, which means that even though it's about 1,200, you put 20% of that, you add 240 to the 1,200, you come to about 1,440. So clearly, the Central Bank of Nigeria is doing that which it is without rocking the boat, right? The point is that the currency is being managed, right? What we call a managed floating rate, right? The people sometimes mistake a managed floating rate for defending the currency. The currency is not being defended. The currency is being managed efficiently so that the level of misalignment between the parallel market and the official market is reduced. You know, that gap dropped about 5 Naira. Now it's about almost 11 Naira. And normally, in the IMF says that if you have not more than a 5% window, this is 1%, right? So this is fairly priced. This is being managed efficiently, and therefore, our confidence is building back. But we must remember that on Friday, in 2 days' time, the Jackson Hole Symposium is going to be there. The Federal Reserve Bank is going to make some comments. The Bank of England is going to also make some very strong comments. And the European Central Bank President Lagarde is going to make some very, very solid comments. What we are seeing is the independence of monetary authority being challenged by political pressures. Right now, if you look at the US dollar has actually depreciated against the basket of currencies by about almost 9 or 10%. You saw that, I think in South Africa or Kenya actually now swapped their dollar debt for one debt, Chinese debt. So we are beginning to see a reorganization and rearrangement of global currencies. The dollar is the supreme currency. The dollar is the major currency. The US is the largest economy in the world. So that remains. But what we are seeing that people are now beginning to tweak with the composition of their reserves, buying more gold and less US dollars. And people are now beginning to actually trade amongst themselves. So generally speaking, the world is becoming more independent and more cautious about putting all the eggs in one basket. I think Nigeria is in that position as well. So clearly speaking, Nigeria is in a good place for now in terms of globally non-aligned. The currency is aligned with its fair value, and inflation is reducing, and investor confidence, at least at the short end of the curve, is beginning to build. I think that's the way to look at it.
Considering where we find ourselves and the next MPC meeting, obviously, we have 2 more to go this year, September and I think November. Do you think that around that table, consideration of loosening might come up? Because you've already highlighted some positives of tightening, which of course I know the central bank is also considering. But do you think that any conversation around easing the monetary policy could come up in any form?
Definitely. And how it's going to be looked at is simple. We come down, we think based on what we have today, based on the data, the inflation data, the foreign exchange reserves, the stability of the currency, and very, very important to note, the drop in the price of petrol, PMS, all the way now down to 865 Naira. It used to be as high as 950. When you put all those things into consideration, we think that the Central Bank of Nigeria at the MPC meeting will consider taking the MPR down by 25 basis points. Why will they do this? The cost of borrowing by the federal government and state governments is tied to the MPR. And if you don't bring it down, you will have some measure of fiscal dominance. 1. 2, the Central Bank of Nigeria has to go with the flow. When US interest rates are coming down and you are standing still, which is what we did in the past, the interest rate inflation differential actually moves in our favor. I think that gives us some room to move without moving too far. I think a 25 basis point cut now and another 25 basis points in November, giving us 50. We're taking the MPR from 27.5 to 27% per annum, still gives us room to maintain solid price stability, to support the currency in its present trajectory, and also to keep investor confidence where it belongs. So generally speaking, I'm not worried about the currency at this time, and I'm not concerned about the level of price inflation. I think, quite frankly, we've done well so far, and we shouldn't be in a hurry to drop rates so sharply, and which will create some distortions.
I'm sure players in the real sector will be excited if this happens, at least one way or the other. They'll heap a sigh of relief. But let's look at consolidating the recent gains, addressing the lingering inflationary pressure. What are those policy recommendations you will talk about? Something comes to my mind: structural reforms, fiscal discipline. What more do you think can be done at this time?
I think that, you see, there's policies, projects, and impact. Policies could be in the right direction. Projects could be there. But the impact is how it affects the people, and how economics is about the welfare of the people. It's not about data. It's about the welfare of the people. How to get these factors, or how to get the supposed palliatives, how to get the spending power, how to make people feel the benefits, is a major thing. And explaining a time lag between when you announce policies, when you implement them, And when the impact is felt, it's very, very, it should be shorter, but it's longer this time. So I think getting the message out, but also sending the right signals. The signals from the central bank are very, very clear and positive. The signals from the fiscal authorities in terms of spending and the impact of spending is not clear. So signals have to be clear, right? And and that is where the political animals have to be able to put their story out there with credibility. No matter what you do, if nobody believes you, then you will not get the impact. So I think the monetary policy direction is clear. The fiscal policy direction is clear. But the impact of fiscal policy is not being felt fully because there are some distortions to the implementation of that. And I've seen the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy has said the right things. He has insisted on certain things being done, but the federal government is only 52%, if I'm right, now about 48% of the total economic package. So the state governors and the state commissioners and all that, we have to see spending restraint. We have to see effective spending, value for money, and we have to see impact. If we don't see these things, then we are just we are wasting our time. We must see impact, we must see credibility, and the message has to be clear, and the signal has to be straightforward.
Finally, before I let you go, Mr. Rewane, we've gotten commendations from the likes of the IMF, even the WTO. DG came in last week and said the economy seems to be stabilizing, things seem to be working right, and I think you alluded to that fact. But my question is, many outside believe we might be getting the macro aspect so excellently, and talking about the micro, that's where it is. The man on the street will be like, oh, inflation at 21.8, foreign reserves at more than 40 billion US dollars. That really doesn't put food on my table. I want to know how much a tuber of yam sells out there. When are we getting to that point where it starts to trickle down, and they start to, understand that something positive is happening in Nigeria?
No, I just told you now that the suspension or removal of the 5% excise duty is putting money into the pockets of the people.
Yes.
There has to be many of those steps. Not only that, there has to be value for money. We are announcing this project, that project, this billion, that billion. But is that value for money? No. It has to have an impact. So now, the public procurement policy man was on television saying all the right things. But we have to see the value. Economics is about the welfare of the people. So yes, you can have all the data, you can have all of these things, but it is now time for those in charge to go into the marketplace to see whether the effect, if this is a road you have built, how many people are using that road? We have the ADMI, Highway Development Management Initiative. Those roads, they're about 19, I think. Only one has been given out to the concessionaire. Those things will be given out immediately. If you don't give those things out to the concessionaires, you are going to be having sound bites and television programs. You must give out the road, the Lagos-Abeokuta road, the Lagos-Ibadan, the Shagamu-Benin. Those roads, the investors have put their money in, they are willing to move. But bureaucracy in the government is delaying those things. Those are easy wins. Those are quick wins. Those are things that this government can achieve great results from within minutes. That's one. Two, the forbearance for the GENCOs, the bailout of the electricity tariffs, has to be done immediately. Everybody is affected by electricity. Everybody in this country is affected. We cannot be at 5,000 megawatts and say we are doing something. Something has to be done dramatically. The president is looking at it. I saw the discussions with the president. It should be done immediately. So two things that must be done. The Highway Development Initiative should be done. The concessioning should be done immediately. The power concession should be done immediately. And then some other initiatives, the concessioning of the airports. We're having all these problems. Concession those airports and let them move on. We don't have to spend money on the airports when the person who is going to take the concession is going to spend his own money. We should use that money for healthcare, for agriculture, for food and all. And we must encourage the refinery, that is the Dangote refinery, to continue to expand, reduce average cost, and continue to bring down the price of petrol. That way, if Nigerians are paying less for petrol, they are paying less for broadband, they are paying less, right, for different activities, and are seeing value of money, value coming into them, everything will be great. But until those things happen, and happen immediately, we are going to have people, taking advantage of this misalignment here and there.
It's a good way to leave it. I must thank you so much, Mr. Bismark Rewane. He's the Managing Director of Financial Derivatives Company Limited. Thank you for sparing your time. We really appreciate this. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
All right, then.